Hi guys, my name is Mista and we're going to be learning about a document about Alexander the Great today. So to start, I would like everyone to close your eyes for just a minute and put yourself in someone else's shoes. Imagine that you are a soldier over 2,000 years ago. You fight with just a spear or a sword and a shield. You've been fighting for years, and the only things you are familiar fighting against are other soldiers on foot and on horses. Now, still in your 2,000-year-old soldier shoes, I want you to open your eyes and imagine what your reaction would be if you went into battle and saw these things in front of you. An army of war elephants, which you've never seen before in your entire life that you know you're going to have to fight against. And a wide and swift river that has the army of war elephants waiting for you on the other side. It's not really the greatest feeling now, is it? So we are going to read about how Alexander and his army, who you were just imagining yourselves as soldiers in, were faced with these issues and how they learned to overcome them. But first we need to learn some vocabulary that you'll be encountering in the document. So I'm going to give you guys, as a group, 5 cards with vocabulary words on them. There's Porus, Clamor, Phalanx, the Hydaspes River, and Cavalry. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 5 more cards that each have a picture of the vocabulary word on them, and I want you to work together and try your best to match them up based on the picture. And when you're done, you can flip them over and see the definition and the words on the back and see if you got it right.
Well, this is a river.
Yeah.
Clamor.
So now we're at what? 2015.
It's a man.
So it was a long time.
I think Phalanx goes with that.
Good job. It's on fire.
Porus, that's a capital letter, so that's a name. Maybe that's his name.
It might be.
Okay. And this, I guess, is Clamor.
Okay, good job. So we'll flip them over and see what the definitions of them are. This, you guys are right, it is Porus. This is, oh wait, no, the definition's on this one. He was an ancient Indian king who fought with Alexander at the battle of the Hydaspes River, which we are going to be learning about. A phalanx, you guys got this right too. It is a group of heavily armed infantry, and it's formed into this setup, I guess, in order, and that's how Alexander fought. Clamor, you also got this right. It's just a loud noise that's usually created by people shouting. And cavalry is infantry and soldiers who fight on horseback. And the Hydaspes River is an ancient river in India that actually goes by a different name now. The Jhelum River is what it's called now, but in ancient times the Greeks called it the Hydaspes River. Okay, so to get started, I'm now going to read the document to you, and you guys can follow along as I read. So we're going to read the questions first. So the questions that you need to be thinking about as you're reading your document. Number 1 is, where is the Hydaspes River? Number 2, explain how Alexander's army was able to cross the Hydaspes before Porus was able to react. Number 3, how was Alexander able to turn Porus's elephants into a kind of weapon? Number 4, how can you use this document to argue that Alexander was great? And number 5, how can you use this document to argue that Alexander was not great? So I'm going to read the document out loud to you, and you guys can follow along. So we're going to start with this note up at the top. It says, Lucius Flavius Arrhenius, known as Arrian, was a Greek philosopher and historian who lived some 400 years after the time of Alexander. His book is considered the best account of Alexander's reign. In this excerpt, Arrian describes Alexander's last major battle, fought against a prince named Porus on the eastern bank of the Hydaspes River in India. Because he was so impressed with Porus's bravery, Alexander allowed him to retain administrative rule after the Indians' defeat. So you can see that this story of Alexander was written actually 400 years after Alexander lived. So we don't know if there's any bias or any misconceptions or misunderstandings with the story, but we just assume it is the best account of what happened here. So, Alexander pitched camp on the bank of the Hydaspes, and Porus was to be seen on the other bank with his whole army and his force of elephants, which we learned at the beginning that Alexander's army had never seen before. He realized that he could not cross at the point where Porus was encamped. His elephants were too numerous. When Alexander saw this, he decided to move his troops in all different directions so that Porus would keep puzzled. At night, he would take most of his cavalry, which we learned were soldiers that fought on horseback, to various points along the river where he would create a clamor, or a loud noise, raise the war cry, and produce all other such noises as would come from men preparing to cross the river. Porus would actually parallel his movements on the other side, leading his elephants toward the shouting, and Alexander got him into the habit of making these corresponding movements. This actually went on for quite a long time until Porus no longer reacted. So he just got used to Alexander's army creating all the noise to where he didn't even think that it was important for him to even react to them making the noise anymore. So the next part is another editor's note. Arrian then writes that Alexander, leaving 5,000 armed men in full view opposite Porus's camp, led a force exceeding 10,000 foot soldiers, archers, and cavalry, and crossed the river about 10 miles upstream. Rafts for ferrying the men were made from hides, wrapped around hay, and sewn watertight. So you can see that they took a lot of thought into making this work. The crossing was further hidden by a midnight thunderstorm. Too late to stop the crossing, Porus arranged his army on a nearby plain and prepared for battle. The narrative continues. The engagement was unlike any other previous battles. Porus's elephants were now boxed in, and the damage inflicted by them fell on friend no less than foe, with men trampled under as the beasts twisted and turned. So you can see that Alexander used the elephants to attack. They got scared, so they were just stomping on whoever they could find, not just the other army. Most of the drivers of the elephants, too, had been brought down by spears. Eventually, the animals grew tired and their charges lost vigor. Alexander then drew his cavalry in a circle around the entire force, and ordered the infantry to lock shields, to group tightly, and to advance as a phalanx, which we also learned was the way that Alexander fought his battles. At this juncture, the Indians all took to flight. So, now that we're done reading, we're going to start answering our questions. Does anyone have any questions about what we read? Is anyone confused about what happened? No? Okay. So, now I would like everyone to answer some of the questions on their own, and then whenever you're done, just give me a thumbs up, and we can go over them together.
Alexander threw his cavalry in a circle around his entire force. So they all boxed him in and ordered the infantry to lock shields and group tightly to advance as a phalanx. Do you remember what that word is actually in your first one?
In a circle around the entire force.
Okay. It's like with your shields and your lock. What was the juncture the Indians all had so that he's Pakistan now. Okay. So that's I want you to answer the question that's together and Porus was able to react together.
Okay, so we're going to start with the first one. Our first question was, where is the Hydaspes River? Does anyone remember where we said the Hydaspes River was?
Was it in India?
It was in India. Porus was an Indian king, so we can kind of figure out that the river where they were fighting at, since Alexander was attacking them, was in India. So good job. Number 2, explain how Alexander's army was able to cross the Hydaspes before Porus was able to react.
They used rafts and they went 10 miles up the river so they couldn't see them.
That's right. And why didn't Porus react as quickly?
Because they had been yelling at the army.
They used that military, it's like a tactic or a strategy to get them. Okay. Good job. Number 3, how was Alexander able to turn Porus's elephants into a kind of weapon?
They boxed them in, and then the elephants got scared and started stepping on the soldiers.
That's right. Very good job. How can you use this document to argue that Alexander was great?
He was really smart.
He was really smart.
It was a good battle strategy.
All right. And how can you use this document to argue that Alexander was not great? This one's a little tricky.
Oh, he killed all the elephants.
I know, that's really sad because you don't want to think of elephants now as being the ones to like attack and kill people. But back then, that's what they're used for. Actually, the document doesn't tell you is that Porus was in India and Alexander's life goal was to conquer Persia. So he was kind of attacking India for no reason. He just kind of wanted more land. It was like more of a greed thing than it was it was a necessity for him to take it over. Okay. Alright. Awesome job, guys. So now let's go over just one more time some of the main ideas that we read about in our document so that whenever you're answering questions about it later, you can have a pretty sure knowledge of about what was told to you in this. Okay, so the first point is that Alexander and his army were stuck by the Hydaspes River and they were unable to cross because Porus's army was on the other side. And they would have gotten attacked, and it was just been a bloody battle that they would have lost a lot of lives in. So to fix this, Alexander came up with the idea to make his cavalry make noise and a lot of clamor at different spots along the river pretty frequently during the night. So Porus reacted to these fake attacks at first, but after a while he got used to them and didn't really pay them any mind anymore. So then Alexander actually does cross the river, and Porus doesn't realize it's happening because he didn't react. So they fought, the elephants were boxed in and defeated, and then Alexander's army started forming the phalanx, which is what they predominantly used in battle, and the Indians all took flight and ran away from the battle. So that's how Alexander won. But now that we have a little bit of extra time, I printed off, these are 8 surprising facts about Alexander the Great that you can look over. It's an article that was on history.com from the History Channel website, and you can look over these and maybe some of them will help you with your question about how you thought Alexander the Great was great, or maybe he wasn't great. So if you want to make a note along the side of them, saying how he was great or not great, and then thank you.